Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Better in Business podcast. I'm Jennifer Vanderwalm, stepping in for Jeannie Savage as your co-host. Over the last 4 episodes, we've spent a lot of time talking about you, your value, your mindset, your productivity, your habits, and your perspective. But every one of those episodes has really been about one thing: learning to lead yourself. Because before we can build successful businesses, we have to become the kind of person capable of leading one. If your vision is to create something bigger than yourself, then there will come a point where personal growth has to become leadership growth. Whether you already have a team, you're thinking about employing someone for the first time, you're leading contractors, suppliers, or even your clients, leadership matters. Today's episode isn't about becoming the loudest voice in the room. It isn't about becoming the perfect boss. It's about becoming the kind of leader your future business needs.
You've tuned into the Better in Business podcast, and I'm your host, Jeannie Savage. I'm a multi-award winning business veteran and head of the Strategic Bookkeeper Network. My network of strategic bookkeepers is dedicated to helping entrepreneurs do better in business. This podcast aims to challenge your thinking. If you're not thinking the right way, how can you act the right way? Each episode will dive into key drivers of success, which I also call the rules of the game. Learn the rules and play to win. Let's go. I like to start every episode by reminding you that it is globally recognized that pillar number one for success is up-to-date, accurate bookkeeping, which is the only way you can see how your business is performing in terms of profit and cash. If your books aren't right up to date, visit betterinbusiness.global, drop me a line, and I'll connect you with a certified strategic bookkeeper. Fire your bookkeeper and hire a strategic bookkeeper. Bookkeeping is a cost, whereas strategic bookkeeping is an investment that averages a 10x return on the fees.
Reflecting on my journey and this part of Jeannie's book, it really resonated with me because if I'm completely honest, working on what she calls the people-pleasing monster has probably become one of the biggest personal journeys I've ever been on. Because what I noticed was that the people-pleasing monster, it wasn't just showing up in my business, it showed up in every area of my life. For a long time, I genuinely believed that putting everybody else's needs before my own somehow made me a good person. I believed that wanting a successful, profitable business made me selfish. That if I put boundaries in place, charged what I was worth, or had difficult conversations, somehow that meant I wasn't caring enough. Looking back now, I realize I had completely confused kindness with self-sacrifice. Coaching with Jeannie and then Amy has challenged this belief. They helped me to realize something that completely changed the way that I look at my business. It is okay to want success, to want to build a profitable business. It is okay to have goals and the ambition to go after them, to want to create something meaningful. Those things don't make you selfish. Building something that can genuinely make a difference in the lives of your clients, your team, and your family. But I also had to face a much harder truth. If I continued to choose to put everyone else's needs ahead of the needs of the business, I'd never build the business that I was dreaming about. So one of the biggest mindset shifts for me was learning to think my business as my boss. Now, I know that sounds a little strange, but please stay with me. My responsibility as the business owner is to serve the needs of the business. Because when the business is healthy, when it's profitable, when it's sustainable, it can look after my team, better serve my clients. It can invest in better systems. It can create opportunities that simply wouldn't exist otherwise. Whereas if I neglected my business because I'm constantly trying to keep everyone else happy, eventually the business will suffer. And when the business suffers, everybody suffers with it. That was a really powerful shift. And I want you to know sometimes I still make mistakes or I still find myself falling back into those old habits and ways of thinking. I sometimes avoid conversations that I'd rather not have but really need to. But I've also learned that leadership isn't the destination that you arrive at. It's a skill that you keep practicing for the rest of your career. Every difficult conversation, every boundary, every decision I make with the long-term health of my business in mind helps me become a better leader and person than I was yesterday. And when I look back over the last couple of years, the biggest achievements in my business haven't come from some better software or working longer hours. They've come from living the very lessons that we've been talking about throughout this mini series. I stood up and I said yes to coaching and needing help. I learned to recognize my value and then back myself. I built new relationships and strengthened the ones that matters. I became more intentional about keeping my promises and following things through. I learned to delegate work to others who could do it better than me, while protecting the work that creates the greatest value for my business today. None of that happened overnight. It wasn't one mindset shift, one conversation, one courageous decision, but it did happen one of those things at a time, those millimeter steps that compound over the long term. And I genuinely believe that's what leadership is, because leadership is modeled long before it is managed. You can't expect confidence from your team if you don't trust yourself. You can't expect accountability if you don't keep your own promises. And you can't expect people to value your systems if you yourself choose to ignore them. The first 4 episodes in this series have actually been preparing us for this moment, because before we can lead others well, we first have to learn to lead ourselves. So there's 2 areas we're looking at today, which is leadership versus management. One of the things I really appreciate as I worked through this chapter in Jeannie's book was it really made the distinction between leadership and management quite clear. Often we use these words interchangeably, but they're actually 2 very different roles. The leader creates the vision. The manager delivers the vision. As business owners, we often think we're only leading the business, but in reality, we can sometimes be constantly switching between being the leader and being the manager, sometimes multiple times in the same day. When we think of the leader, we are often asking questions like, where are we going in this business? Why does this business exist? Who are we trying to become? What kind of culture do we want to build? What promises do we want to make and keep for our clients? The manager asks a different set of questions. How can we make that happen? Who is responsible? Do we have the right systems? Is the work being completed? Are we delivering on our promises? If we only lead and never manage, we'll have plenty of exciting ideas, but very little will actually happen. And if we manage and we never lead, we'll probably end up with a very efficient business that has forgotten where it's actually trying to go. And I think in particular, in small business, we don't always get the luxury of choosing one role over another. We have to sometimes become both. Jeannie summarizes management into this amazing, simple 5-function list. They're really easy to remember, but they're really powerful. Plan, staff, organize, direct, and control. At first glance, they sound a little corporate, but I actually think they're incredibly practical. Planning is simply asking, what are we trying to achieve? What's our next priority? Without a plan, we'll spend our days reacting instead of intentionally moving the business forward in the direction we're trying to achieve. Staffing isn't just about hiring employees, about making sure the right work is sitting with the right people. For some of you listening, that might be with employees. For others, it could be with contractors, virtual assistants, or outsourced providers. And if you're a solo business owner, the question might become, am I the best person to be doing all this work? Organization is about creating clarity. Do people know what's expected? Do they understand the process? Have we given them the tools and resources they need to succeed? Directing is where leadership becomes visible. It's in communicating, coaching and providing feedback, answering questions, helping people understand not only what they're doing, but why it matters. And then there's control. And I know this word can sound a little harsh, but this isn't about micromanaging people. It's about checking whether the business is delivering on the promises it made. So are the systems working? Are the deadlines being met? Are the clients receiving the kind of experience we want them to receive? Because if we never stop to check the outcome, we'll never know where we need to improve. One example that's really helped me to think about these 5 functions is this. Imagine one of your team comes to you and they say they're completely overwhelmed. As a manager, instead of jumping immediately to problem solving the very issue that's right in front of you, you can choose to step back and ask some really powerful questions, such as, did we plan this workload properly? Do we have the right people doing the right work? Are our systems organized well enough? Have I communicated my expectations clearly? And what do I need to review so we don't find ourselves back in this position next week or next month or in 6 months' time? That's leadership and management working together. So when you look at the 5 functions as a whole, you start to realize that management isn't about telling people what to do. It's also about creating an environment where people have every opportunity to succeed at the task you've given them. This has changed the perspective and the game plan. Of course, understanding what good leadership looks like is one thing. Actually, living it can be much harder. Because for me, the biggest obstacle wasn't a lack of knowledge. It was having the courage to put that knowledge into practice. And that's exactly where Jeannie introduces something that I think many of us know all too well. That people-pleasing monster. I smiled when I read that because I think so many business owners, particularly those of us in service-based businesses, already know exactly what she means. Most of us didn't start our businesses because we wanted to manage people. We didn't start because we enjoyed difficult conversations. We started because we genuinely wanted to help people. We care. We want our clients to succeed. We want our team to succeed. We want people to enjoy working with us. The challenge is that the very quality that makes us great at serving others can sometimes be the thing that holds us back the most as leaders. We avoid the difficult conversations because we don't want to upset someone. We keep saying yes when we should probably be saying no. We let poor performance continue because we know someone's having a hard time. And we convince ourselves it'll get better. They'll work it out. That we don't want to make things awkward. But here's what I've learned. Avoiding the conversation doesn't remove the problem. It just delays it. And while we're delaying it, the consequences are starting to grow and compound. The team starts to feel it. The business starts to feel it. And eventually, the clients start to feel it. That's why courage is such an important leadership skill. Not because courageous conversations are enjoyable, but because they're necessary. Another one of my favorite practical ideas from this chapter is something so simple yet really, really effective. Jeannie talks about the different roles in business like wearing different hats. Sometimes we're wearing the coach and educator hat. Sometimes we might be wearing the mentor hat. Other times we're wearing the friend hat. But there are times when we have to put on our management hat. And she suggests that if this is an area that you really struggle with in swapping between the different roles, that you choose to say it out loud in the conversation. You can approach it by just saying, I'm just going to take my friend hat off for a moment and put my manager hat on so that we can have this conversation. Is that okay? I love that because immediately it changes the conversation. It reminds both people that this isn't personal. It's not about criticism. It's not about winning and losing. It's about doing what's right for the business, the team, and ultimately the clients we all serve. For me, that was really helpful way of thinking about leadership and management, because becoming a better leader or manager doesn't mean becoming less caring. It meant caring enough to have the difficult conversation. Another mindset shift that I had while working through this was realizing that accountability is not an unkind thing. It's actually one of the greatest care that we can show someone. I want you to think about everything that happens before someone is expected to perform independently in your business. Okay? You've carefully recruited them. You've welcomed them into your business. You've trained them. You've answered their questions. You've shown them your systems. You've supported them while they learnt the role. And you've reached the point where you're confident that they're capable. Now, before jumping to conclusions when things go wrong after this point, we do have to pause and ask ourselves a few questions, such as, is there something happening in their personal life? Are they overwhelmed? Have priorities changed? Have I unintentionally created a bottleneck situation? Have I given them everything they need to succeed? That's good leadership too. But once you've genuinely explored these possibilities, if someone understands the process and continues to repeatedly choose not to follow it, that's no longer a training issue. That's an accountability issue. That distinction completely changed the way I approach leadership and management. It helped me to separate the difference between someone's capability from their choices. If they don't know how, that's my responsibility. But if they do know how and they're choosing not to, that is a leadership and management conversation. And as uncomfortable as that conversation might feel, we actually owe it to everybody else in the business to have this conversation. Because poor performance never affects just one person. It's never just one task that gets missed. It's the fact that someone else had to pick that task up, that deadlines had to move, that promises got broken, that trust begins to erode. So accountability isn't about catching people out doing the wrong thing. It's about protecting the promises that you and your business have made. Of course, leadership and management isn't just about correcting people. It's actually much, much more about how we're helping people to succeed. Jeannie has a couple of concepts that I love about this, and I'm just going to go through two of them now. So my favorite of these is what Jeannie calls the emotional bank account. Imagine every member of your team has an emotional bank account with you. Every time you notice their efforts, recognize improvement, celebrate a win, or simply thank them for showing up consistently, you're making a deposit. Then, when you need to provide constructive feedback, you're making a withdrawal. Jeannie encourages us to aim for at least 3 deposits before each withdrawal. And I think that's such a practical reminder that leadership isn't just about identifying the problems. It's also about noticing progress. It's about encouraging growth. It's about helping people become better than they were yesterday. One thing I've learned myself is that those deposits have to be genuine. People know when you're truly acknowledging and noticing their effort. And they also know when praise only appears because you're about to tell them something difficult. So people don't need constant compliments. They need to know that they're seen, that their contribution matters, that somebody notices the effort that they're putting in. Jeannie also talks about another fantastic option, which she calls the feedback sandwich, beginning with something that the person is doing really well, then being honest about what needs to improve, and then finishing by reinforcing another strength that you know that they have. Whether you use this exact structure every time isn't really the point. The real lesson is this: Constructive feedback should leave someone feeling clearer, not smaller. They should leave knowing exactly what success looks like and believing that they're capable of achieving it. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, performance still doesn't improve. That's where leadership and management would require the greatest of courage. Performance management shouldn't be seen, and it isn't about punishment. It's about giving someone every reasonable opportunity to succeed, retraining where it's needed, clarifying expectations, checking for understanding, agreeing on what success looks like moving forward, and ensuring everyone leaves the conversation with the same understanding. But leadership also means recognizing when enough support has been provided. And Jeannie always reminds us that it's important to be tough but fair. And I think these two words are incredibly important. Not just tough, but tough and fair. Fair leaders don't lower the standards because the conversation feels uncomfortable. The standard is made clear. They provide support. They coach and educate, encourage, invest in their people, and then they hold them accountable to the expectations that they've both agreed to. Interestingly, Jeannie points out that businesses with strong leadership, clear systems, and fair accountability often lead to having lower staff turnover. Sometimes that might seem surprising, but when you think about it, people thrive when expectations are clear, when they know where they stand, and when they're treated consistently the same way. Another thing I've learned over the years is that the conversations I worried about the most were rarely as difficult as I imagined them to be. In fact, many of them, when done diligently and fully, strengthen the relationship because people really appreciate honesty and they appreciate clarity. They appreciate knowing where they stand. Do I still enjoy difficult conversations? Yeah, no, absolutely not. But I've stopped seeing them as something that I do to people. And now I see them as something I do for the business and for my team. Because if I genuinely care about someone, then I owe it to them to give them the clarity they need to succeed. Leadership isn't about avoiding discomfort. It's about being willing to walk through the discomfort because you care about the people, the business, and the outcome. Sometimes we think leadership is about having all the answers. And I've come to believe that it's actually about having the courage to ask better questions, to have conversations that you've been avoiding, and consistently choose what's best for the long-term health of your business, even when it's uncomfortable. So once we've learned to lead with courage, then the next question becomes, who are we inviting into that environment? Because great teams and great cultures and great businesses, they don't happen by accident. They are built intentionally, one person at a time. One of the biggest takeaways from this chapter about team culture isn't something you write on a wall. It's not a mission statement. It's not a list of values that's sitting in a folder somewhere. Culture is about what people experience in the everyday. It's created through strong leadership, clear expectations, good systems, and consistent management. It's created when people know what's expected of them, when they understand why their work matters, when they trust that everyone, including the owner, is working to the same standard. Culture isn't something you announce. It's something you demonstrate. G dives into this conversation about recruitment. And I have to admit, she challenged my thinking here. Like many business owners, I've probably looked at recruitment in the past as simply filling a vacancy, finding someone to do the work. But that's not what we're really doing. Every single person we invite into our business changes it. They influence the culture. They influence the standards. They influence the energy of the team. And ultimately, they influence the experience our clients receive. That's why recruitment deserves far more thought They're simply asking, can this person do the job? When you approach this, you want to recruit with intention. And Jeannie shares the recruitment process she uses in her own business, and it's incredibly detailed. She starts with carefully considered position description. She uses questionnaires so candidates can just demonstrate not only their experience, but also whether they can follow instructions and pay attention to the details. She uses psychometric tools such as DISC and wealth dynamics to better understand how people naturally communicate and work. She conducts multiple interview stages, and throughout this process, she's constantly asking one question: will this person strengthen the business we're trying to build? Now, I don't think the lesson here is that every business owner needs a copy of Jeannie's exact recruitment process. The lesson is something much bigger. There should be nothing casual about who you invite into your business. Recruitment isn't about filling a seat. It's about protecting your culture. It's about understanding your people. One thing I particularly liked about the way Jeannie talks is when she talks about psychometric testing, not in a way of putting people into boxes, but in a way of understanding people better, understanding how people communicate, how they solve problems, how they naturally contribute, how they like to work. Imagine how much easier leadership becomes when you understand not only yourself, but the people around you. Imagine how much stronger a team becomes when everyone understands each other's strengths. That's what these tools are really for, not labels. And understanding creates empathy. Empathy creates better communication. And better communication creates stronger teams. The other thing that we need to talk about is about hiring for more than skill. Earlier in our discussion in chapters of Jeannie's books, she talks about there are 4 different types of employees: superstars, workhorses, yo-yos, and time wasters. What I loved wasn't the labels themselves, it's what they represent. Reliable workhorses keep the business moving. Superstars not only deliver consistently, they challenge us to become better leaders because they're exceptional at what they do. And then there are the ones that are simply not the right fit, not because they're bad people, but because they don't align with the standards or culture that you're trying to create. One of my first favorite pieces of advice from this chapter is something that can feel quite uncomfortable at first. Hire people that are better than you. Love that. Because if we're always the smartest person in the room, our business can only ever grow as far as we can. Great leaders build teams whose strengths complement their own. That's when the business begins to grow beyond the owner. And I've learned over the last few years is that every person who joins your business changes it. Sometimes they strengthen it immediately. Sometimes they expose weaknesses in your systems. Sometimes they challenge your thinking. But sometimes they help you become a better leader. I've also learned that recruitment isn't about finding someone to do the work. It's about finding someone who believes in where you're going, in your vision and your mission. Because skills can be taught, and systems can be learned, processes can be documented, but values, curiosity, integrity, those things are much harder to teach, and they're often the qualities that make the greatest difference over time. As I reached the end of the chapter, I realized something. Everything we've talked about today, leadership, management, courage, culture, recruitment, it's all pointing to one simple truth. Great businesses are built intentionally. And that's a thought I'd love to leave you with today. So instead of leaving you with a long list of things to change this month, I'd simply like to leave you with 2 questions. What kind of leader does my future business need me to become? And what courageous conversation have I been avoiding that would move me closer to becoming that leader? Not the business you have today, the business you're trying to build. Because every episode in this mini-series has been preparing you for that future. recognizing your value, changing your mindset, protecting your time, building better habits, developing your leadership. None of these things are separate lessons. They were stepping stones, preparing you for the business you're capable of creating. As we wrap up today's episode, I hope it's encouraged you to think about leadership a little bit different. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It isn't about being perfect. It is certainly not about having all the answers. It's about continuing to learn, leading with integrity, communicating with clarity, and creating an environment where people genuinely succeed. When we started this mini-series, I invited you to recognize your own value. Today, I'd like to leave you with one final thought before we head to our last episode. The business you're trying to build is waiting for the leader you're becoming. In our final episode, we're going to bring this series together. We'll explore how great leaders build great businesses through systems, critical drivers, quality assurance, and continued improvement, and consistently keeping the promises that they've made. Until then, I'd encourage you to spend some time on the accompanying workbook. Choose one area, just one, take one small step, and keep moving forward. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Better in Business podcast. I look forward to seeing you next time as we bring our Getting It Done mini-series to a close.
I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. I would love to help you start doing better in business right now by giving you a free little ebook. It's a how-to guide. It's called The 7 Deadly Cash Flow Sins. And also I've developed a business health check for you. It's super high value. Both are available at betterinbusiness.global. If you would like to fire your bookkeeper and hire a strategic bookkeeper to start enjoying a return on investment and get the support you need to optimize your business cash and profit and time well, simply visit betterinbusiness.global, drop me a line and I'll connect you with a certified strategic bookkeeper near you. I'll see you in the next episode.